What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the RedBeard Outdoors podcast. I've got an awesome guest for you guys, and you guys have probably seen recently on my posts and things that we've been getting into in the last couple months. I've got my kids out shooting. We've been blowing things up. We've been having fun with things that are a little bit louder than the typical archery stuff that we have been sharing lately. And so I brought Scott Volquartsen on, and he is a co-owner of Volquartsen company. I don't know if Volquartsen Arms, but they do a lot of rimfire awesomeness. And if you guys are one, either just getting into firearms, two, you've got a kid that wants to go out and shoot, you don't want to spend a ton on ammo, you don't want them to be scared out of their minds shooting your big 308 or whatever it may be that you have in the safe. This is a great way to get kids introduced. We're going to get into a little bit more about what Volquartsen firearms are versus the standard, maybe Ruger 1022, why you would want something like this, and also why Scott and his family, his dad, initially started Volquartsen Firearms, and why they chose rimfire over some other custom style rifle. So with that being said, Scott, for people that don't know who are you, man?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm Scott Volquartsen. I am second generation owner. My dad started the company as a hobby back in 1974. I've been here since I got out of school. I went to school for tool and die, and my brother and I have ran the business for about the last 20 to 25 years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with that, it's cool that you say your dad started this as a hobby. I'm assuming he was like a lot of us men that like to tinker, like to make things a little bit better and even more custom for what we're wanting. Is that kind of how that started for him?
100%. He loved to hunt and he loved to shoot. But the downside is he had no money to buy nicer firearms. So he was left buying, lower end products. But he's also somebody that is always trying to find a better way to do something, whether it's firearms or anything else. He's always we always made fun of him because it was overkill with everything. If he made a blade for his tractor, he had to buy a new tractor to pick up the blade that he made because it ended up too heavy. So overkill was the name of the game. But he got his start with doing a lot of like custom refinishing, like rebluing and just different things for his buddies hunting firearms. And then word slowly spread, and he started doing it more and more as a hobby out of our basement. He had just like a small benchtop lathe, the benchtop mill. He was 100% self-taught on all that stuff because his main job was actually a tax collector for the state of Iowa. Which he hated going to work every day. But he's, with a family of 6, he also needed income coming in, and the gun part of it wasn't supporting it. Mm-hmm. So he decided he would do that at night. And it started growing. And then in 1986, he finally made the leap. He's like, okay, I really hate my job. I'm going full-time into this. If it doesn't work, I'll go find something else that I like, but at least I've tried.
Yeah.
And at that time, he was a one-man shop, and he would work on anything: custom revolvers, centerfire rifles. It was more almost anything that would put money on the table is what he would do. And he was always afraid to turn down work. And then over time, he got busier and busier, and he always wanted to keep it strictly a family business. Mm-hmm. So it was him. My grandfather would help out a little bit. Eventually, my mom started working there full time, but it was mainly still just him doing all the work. Mm-hmm. So he's like, I don't have time to do everything. He had a few articles that were published in American Handgunner and Guns and Ammo, so he was very fortunate that way, and things started getting busier and busier. And that's when he decided, I have to start specializing in something. And he looked around. There was already companies, building custom ARs. There was custom 1911s, which he loved to do, but there was people already doing them. And he kind of looked at the 22 market and said, you know, almost every gun owner has a 22.
Mm-hmm.
They've either started on a 22 or they still own a 22. And he started looking at the Ruger 1022 and the Ruger Mark II at the time as a platform to make aftermarket parts. And him and Jim Clark, who was based out of Louisiana and was a little bit older than Dad, they kind of pioneered the entire 1022 craze. It's crazy to look back now and think there was a time that nobody customized the 1022.
Yeah.
But I remember him going to Brownells, who's one of our oldest dealers, and actually Bob Brownell, the original founder, was very instrumental in helping Dad learn how to blue and would answer all his questions. And he went to him with this idea of an aftermarket barrel for the 1022. And they said, basically, you're nuts. Don't ever bring that idea back to us. Good thing for us, Dad is also very stubborn. So he's like, I still think there's a market for it.
Yeah, that's good.
And
I will say I will say that the 1022 and the Mark IV, which I guess now the SR22 is also part of that from Ruger, but those two, the Mark II at the time, but now the Mark IV, and then the 1022, whether it's the bolt action or the semi-auto, now there's so many variations of it. That is like the Glock of the rimfire world, essentially. Yeah.
It's crazy how that's exploded. And I think a lot of it was one of those platforms that guys could, the home hobbyists could work on, because you have to remember this was all before YouTube and you could just hop on and watch how to do anything. So it had to be something that the average person could install. And people may argue that the original Mark II, nobody could disassemble and reassemble, but and so that was a lot of it. And then, he would do a lot of like custom trigger jobs. And he got to the point, he's like, I need to make parts where they're so simple. And this is his line. And he's like, I need to make them so simple that even, because I was a teenager, that even you can install them and help.
There you go.
So that's where like the aftermarket parts started. And then in it was 2005 when my brother and I took over. Our challenge was we wanted to keep the family business feel, but we also wanted to grow and expand beyond that, because the downside that we saw growing up was we took very few vacations, because if Dad was gone, there was no money coming in. And I didn't necessarily want to forego that. And I don't begrudge him anyway. He was building a business.
Right.
But I also realized that if he would have maybe hired outside the family, it would have afforded a few more chances to get away and enjoy some of the, other parts of life too. So, and it was, not to go too long here, but also it was like a perfect time because everything he had done was manual machining. A lot of his, conversions, everything that he did, he would do by looking at it.
Wow.
Where the world had been changing, AutoCAD was more easily accessible. SolidWorks was becoming a thing. CNCs were almost becoming required. And the biggest part of that is the marketing world had completely changed from when he got started.
Mm-hmm.
I remember arguing with him that we needed a website, and for the life of him, he couldn't figure out why. And to his credit, we always thought he would be 90 years old walking around still telling us what to do in the shop. But once we kind of took over, he would still tell us occasionally what to do, but for the most part, he's like, okay, it's your guys' baby now. I'm here if you have questions, but you're also going to have to learn on your own, make some of the mistakes yourself so you can adjust from them.
Right. No, that makes sense. And that's cool. Going back to building that business up, people that I know that have built successful businesses don't really get to take vacations very frequently. It takes multiple years to finally I'm assuming even feel comfortable to go on a vacation and not be worried that the business is going to be blown up when you get back. Because it's something that people that work for, corporations kind of take for granted that they can go in and clock out and get a paycheck. Whereas business owners, it's very much, what am I doing right now to further that business? Because if I'm not doing it, no one else is, at least when you're growing the business. Now you've got other employees and people to, that can, and even then you're handing over responsibilities that you used to do. And you're concerned with like, can I trust this person that I just hired to go and do this and not screw it up? Yep.
Technology has helped with that because I do have constant access when I am gone. But even that, I don't think I've ever taken a vacation where my morning doesn't start going through, just checking in on things, checking email, doing those different things. And even when you're on vacation, you're never really completely removed from the business. You're always thinking of, your point, you're thinking, okay, what should I be doing? How can I further the business? What about this? But the thing that I've learned as I've gotten older is it's sometimes when you're on vacation, you're on a flight, wherever, that the solution to a problem you've been racking your brain in the office for the last 2 weeks hits you and you're like, how did I not see this before? So, yeah. Yep. And my wife would argue I'm still not good at taking vacations. So
yeah, exactly. There was something that happened recently. We were driving somewhere and, I'm the one driving. The kids are listening. We usually listen to audiobooks when we're driving somewhere, and everyone's kind of doing their own thing. And I've listened to this. It was either Harry Potter or something like that I've heard a million times and read the book 5 or 6 times. So my brain just kind of tunes out, and I'm just like thinking of all these other things. And my wife's like, "Hey, you still here?" I'm like, I'm here, just my brain is elsewhere because I'm driving and I'm thinking of all the things I could be doing instead of driving,
and I can relate to that. Even like if I go out to eat and it's a great experience, I'm thinking, what are they doing that's making it this great customer experience? What can I learn from this that we can apply, to our, granted, they're completely different businesses, but I'm like, they've done something that made me feel a certain way. How can we do that?
Exactly.
What can I learn from that? And sometimes my wife or my kids will be like, can't you just go eat? And I'm like, well, I can try, but, and much like you, when I'm on the road, I'm thinking, I'm always listening to podcasts and different things, just trying to catch, because I made a mistake for a long time of, we're in a niche business. We offer a niche product. It's a family-owned business. So what all these other business mentors say doesn't really apply to us, was the thought that I had. Where in reality, it doesn't matter what business you're in. Ultimately, it comes down to customer experience, offering a good product, and then backing it up with service.
Yep.
And I've since learned that it doesn't matter where I'm at, what I'm doing, I can learn from other people. And it's more applicable than I ever thought when I was younger.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, to your point there, I mean, we just went out to eat this weekend, and, the kids, like one of them came up to me, he's like, because we had 2 separate tables and our food got there first, even though we had ordered second, and we had 2 different servers. And one of my little 10-year-old comes over, he's picking off my steak, etc. And he's like, why isn't our food here? And I said, well, and I'm starting to like point out some things. I'm like, this server did this server did that. I can only assume, blah, we're going through how he can learn from this experience as a 10-year-old. He maybe will learn 1 or 2 things if we're lucky from all that. But at the same time, like, that's kind of, instead of getting mad about it, I'm like, well, let's learn from it. Here's what we can do, and here's what you need to not do whenever you do have a job like this, learn from this experience. So, yeah, it's funny how the mind works like that. You can't really turn it off. It just, it just keeps going. There's always something to learn. I love that.
And that is something I will credit a lot to my mom and dad of long before there was all the podcast and self-help books and all these different things. I'm always amazed. They were doing a lot of the right things from the customer service standpoint, always backing, up our product, even at the point of being a disadvantage to us, but an advantage to the customer. My mom always used to answer the phones.
Mm-hmm.
And we would always joke, we're like, okay, what time are they coming over for dinner? You know, she got to know them so well. And fast forward a few years, we had customers that would bring like shrimp to us from Florida and stop by. We'd have, and at the time, I'm like, this is so, what does this have to do with business? You know, I was a teenager that thought he knew everything. But as I've gotten older, I'm like, how amazing is it that long before social media, long before these different things, they were building these relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still customers that I know Dad had before I started out in the business that still come back to us. And those are the ones that I cherish.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm like, hopefully we've done something right that they've stayed with us for 30 or 40 years.
Right. Exactly. It's, you know, and that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand now. And I try and instill that in the kids as well. You know, everything's technological now. Everything's a quick text message or a, you know, whatever. And I'm like, phone calls still matter. Voicemails still matter. Shaking people's hands, showing up. You know, you apply for, we've got an 18-year-old right now that just graduated and he's job searching and he's kind of in the data security area. And absolutely loves that. He loves nerding out over those things all the time, which I'm great with. But I am trying to instill in him, like, yes, you've applied to 3 jobs every day for the last 4 weeks, right? How many of those did you walk in looking, you know, decent, not in your PJs, but like looking good and cleaned up and shaking their hand and saying, hey, I sent my resume in 2 weeks ago. Haven't heard anything back. Just want to put a face to the name and shake their hand. And it's funny to me that he's just like, huh. And I'm like, I've taken you on trips where I've done that personally, and obviously it didn't click. So let's try this again, you know. And that's still that human interaction. I think even more so nowadays is so valuable because there's so much fake that's put out there. Everyone's, you know, their best highlights is what makes it on social media. And and I texted a buddy because I was out shooting a video for YouTube, and I ended up putting an arrow through one of my little DJI action cams. And man, like, I was holding it in so hard. I wanted to just swear because I saw the glass just, and I was like, all that footage that was on that camera is gone, and I don't have a camera anymore over there. And like, I caught that portion on camera and I sent it to him. I'm like, I'm posting this whether I look like I suck at archery or not, and I missed that bad that I hit the camera. But I like to keep it as real as possible because I feel like there's not a lot of that out there. You know, and
I think that's relatable to the people that watch you.
Yeah.
If every time, you know, you're hitting the center of the target, that's not relatable because people that, whether it's firearms or bows, they know that not every shot is going to be dead center. But a lot of times, to your point, that's all we see on social media, that, oh, that guy must be the greatest shooter of all time because he never misses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I get suspicious about that. And I'll be honest with you, I've been with people that I've caught them sticking arrows back in targets, and I'm like, what are you doing? Like, at least make a joke out of, you know, the fact that you had a crappy shot, you had a flyer, you know, or I don't know what happened there, you know. Oh, well, guess, you know, I'm human, I'm not a robot. But you know, it's definitely something that I look for in people when I whether I'm working with a company or I'm meeting new people. I want someone who is relatable, who's a real person, not some AI generated, you know, perfect target archer. And then you have those people that are really that good, and you can tell that they really are that good because they are almost like a robot, you know, with how they go through their process, whether again it's shooting an arrow or shooting at a target with you know, a rimfire, or shooting long distance with muzzle loaders, or even you know, out to a mile plus with those centerfire rifles. But anyway, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that's what you bring up, a great point of like the personal connection. That's what I love about doing events and getting out there and doing things, is you find out real fast if the person you're talking to is the same person you've been following online.
Yep. Exactly.
It doesn't, you know, and in most cases, I've been very fortunate. The people I've met have lived up to that. But there's also those few that, and it doesn't take long to realize that
No,
it's two completely different people. And, you know, to each their own. I don't ever disparage anybody, but
yeah,
I prefer not to also work with those type of people, because if they're going to represent our product, you know, and if they have, you know, we've had people, that they were doing a review on a pistol, and they called back and they're like, I hate your grip that you put on there. And they're like, can I say that in the video? I'm like, sure.
mm-hmm.
I'm like, you can't like every single thing about every single product you test,
because then it feels bought.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah, and that's the same thing, you know, that I try and highlight whenever I talk to people. You know, I'll, again, going back to archery, I shoot for Victory. I'm sponsored by Victory Archery, but I'll tell people Easton is a great arrow. I just personally choose to shoot Victory, but Easton's right here in my backyard in Utah, and I've been to the facility. I know they make quality products. Go shoot both and see what works best for you. You know, some people don't like the carbon weave on Victory arrows. Go with the solid carbon on a Easton arrow, whatever. There's all these personal preferences, and that's the beauty of it, is of this kind of market that we have, is that you do have options. You're not stuck with just one, you know.
Well, and if we all like the same thing, it'd be so boring.
Exactly.
I mean, we've built stuff that we've had people call and say, that's like the ugliest thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, you know, then the next guy, you know, the next person loves it.
Yep.
Or we, you know, especially like, but now there's so many different Cerakote patterns. You know, we've had people even within our own shop that'll get one done and they love it. They'll look at me. They're like, what do you think? I'm like, I wouldn't shoot it. and at first they would get offended. I said that there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. It's a good thing. No one's going to steal your gun. Okay.
Yeah. I said, if you like it, that's all that counts.
Yeah, exactly.
It has, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's hilarious. Well, sweet. Well, I want to pivot back to a little bit. I mean, you did say why your dad initially got into the 22 area. Do you guys do 17 HMR or any other rimfire, or is it only 22s?
We do all rimfires. We do.
Okay.
Well, let me back up. We used to do 17 WSM. We don't offer that anymore, but we do 17 HMR. We do 22 WMR, 17 Mach 2, and 22 long rifle. That's
more calibers than I knew. I just knew 22 LR and 17 HMR. But okay, so that's a good list of them out there. That's awesome. I know the 17 is obviously a little bit smaller bullet, but it goes a lot faster than the 22. Some people even use them for coyote hunting. You know, they don't, if they want to keep the pelts and they don't want to destroy the pelt with a bigger bullet, they'll use that sometimes. But so with that, with the rimfire market, obviously, like you said, it's something that's in pretty much anyone's safe. If you have a gun, you probably have a Ruger 10/22 or some version of a 22 pistol.
Yeah.
And so you guys have continued with that. What makes Volquartsen stand out amongst other either custom rifle builders or even just, and then we can get into, you know, why would someone want to go with your version of a Ruger 10/22 versus the standard, you know, 10/22?
I think the biggest thing that we do is we design it for performance first and foremost, and we come back and figure out what it's going to cost second, which means it may not be for everybody, but there's a lot of little things that we've learned over 40 plus years, you know, going back to my dad, that, you know, we may incorporate a little thing here, finish on this part, where by itself, it's like, well, that's not a big deal. Why would I pay for that? But when you add them all together, you know, for example, we do something that, as far as I know, nobody else is doing it right now. We laser harden our breeches of all of our rimfire barrels.
Okay.
And the reason we do that versus like induction hardening is we can control exactly how deep it goes. And it's a pain. We have to ship them off. It's expensive. But we also, we built some pistols for CCI's test facility, and they sent me a barrel back just to show me what it looked like that had a documented 109,000 rounds through it.
Ooh.
And the breech face looked brand new. We posted on social last year sometime. So it's little things that all add up. We DLC coat all of our bolts. which that's become a very popular finish. Yep. But even that we do a little bit differently with the way it's polished. And we always have vendors calling us saying we could do this less expensive than what they can do it. And we'll try it. I mean, we don't like to spend extra money if we don't have to.
Yeah.
I mean, but many times whenever we try to take a shortcut, we end up with that's what we have for a firearm is it's a shortcut. And we've had a lot of people over the years say, why don't you build like a beginner level or entry level economy line for people that want to own one of your firearms that may not be able to afford one of your regular ones? And my reply to that is, I don't know how. It'd be easy to do on the surface, but every time we try to do that, since we know better, we put all those things into it and we end up right back where we're at. And from a personnel and employee standpoint, I don't know how to have our employees back, okay, this one is quote unquote economy. So you don't have to take as much time on this, but this one over here, make sure you take time. My brain doesn't work that way.
Yep.
I'm like, if we're going to do it, let's do it right.
Right.
So and even like our internal components, we wire EDM cut our extractors, our hammers, our sears, everything. And guys will say, hey, you could do those through MIM or do them through this process. It's faster. It's better. It is faster. It's more efficient. But when we did that, like on the 17 HMR, we started running into problems. So it's, we machine almost everything in-house. So that also allows us to do much more testing and make changes. Where back in the day, we would outsource some stuff. And then when you try to make a change, they're holding a machine and everything becomes very rapid. So you stay away from making those changes that sometimes you need to make.
Right.
When you're doing that in-house, you can make the change, you can test, you can hold a machine, you're not paying a company to do it. And we're constantly testing new finishes, new ways to do things. And the other thing I think that we do very well is we do listen to a lot of customer feedback. And again, something I've learned as I've gotten older is it's easy to get the good feedback and read through it. Sometimes you have to spend more time on the negative feedback because I've learned, I'm like, if they care enough to write an email of the problems they're having, we should care enough to read through it and figure out if it's a one-off issue. Is it something we need to fix, on a larger scale? Because I've learned that most, and obviously there's exceptions to the rule, but most negative feedback when they send it, it's coming from a place of caring about the brand, the product, what they're getting. Otherwise they could just scrap it, post online, this part sucked. But I mean, we'll get emails that'll be extremely long. And I'm like, that's pretty cool that they care that much about the part that they're offering that feedback.
Yeah. And that's cool that you look at it that way, because some people would take offense to that and, just kind of scrap the email and say, whatever, to the heck with it. But in reality, I love the way that you look at that, because that is how you can get better. And some people really are just keyboard warriors, whatever you want to call them. They're like, they just want to be jerks. But for the most part, you're right. It does come, especially an email. If someone's, it's not a comment on social media or whatever. They spent the time to write that email. It generally is from, some kind of perspective, whether it's they spent a good amount of money on a rifle and they don't like one or two things about it. That's valid feedback. Because I mean, again, going back to it, I won't discuss, prices per se, but Volquartsen isn't your typical Walmart Ruger 1022. Like, and that's, you're a lot nicer in explaining why you guys don't do a budget line than I would probably be, because I'd be a little snarky and be like, hey, you can go to Walmart and pick one up. Like, just go get a 1022 if that's what you want. And they're great guns. Again, nothing against that. I've got multiple and the kids love them. But if you want something that's going to, there's just the little ergonomic differences in what you guys provide and the finishes that kind of blend all together. When you have something that looks good and functions really well, it's not going to be the same price as your standard Ruger 1022. It's just not. Even the little things like your charging handle on the Mark IV that you guys do versus the standard Mark IV, that just allows for you, whether you wear gloves, whether you're going through multiple rounds, whatever it is for kids, even would be easier for them to grab and pull back.
We've seen it help kids. We've seen it help women, guys that may have an injury.
Yep.
Even just older shooters that may not have the grip strength they once had, could be nerve, whatever it might be. Because our thing is the way the factory bolt is set up, a lot of times guys will end up with pinched fingers. And in our mind, if you're introducing your kids or somebody new and they snip their finger, and granted, it's not going to, they're not going to lose a finger by any stretch of imagination.
No. But they'll remember that
negative experience. It's going to be harder to get them back at the range.
Yep. Exactly.
And, some of the coolest stories we get is I have a friend who he's a big hunter, loves to shoot, has 1,000-yard range, but he couldn't get his kids into shooting. And it drove him crazy because that's his passion. He ended up buying one of our NV pistols, which his son absolutely loved. I got a text one Sunday. He's like, thank you. He goes, this is what I needed. And now that son has graduated into some of the larger caliber stuff. And, but it all goes back to that positive first experience. And I'm sure you've seen this too. I see it a lot at the range sometimes where as guys, we love to let our ego get the best of us. And we show our kids or our wives or girlfriends or whoever it might be, set out to impress them with what we know how to shoot instead of introducing them slowly. Because shooting, especially for people that didn't grow up around firearms, I know you did, but shooting can be a very intimidating thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm like, my thing is let's set them up for as much success as possible from the beginning. And then if they still don't like it, that's their choice. If they like it and they want to learn more. But I think the lower we can make that barrier to entry, the more chance for success we have of getting them back to the range.
Exactly. Yeah, it's something that, my son even brought it up because we're spoiled out here in Utah. We've got a lot of public land, which is a big reason why I stayed here and didn't move back east. And we can kind of drive and go wherever. Like I said, we've been heavily shooting bows and there's no real noise. There's not any recoil, things like that. You don't have to wear ear pro and have, that on your head. And the other day I was like, look, I need to go sight in my rifle. I'd love for you to come to the range with me. We'll break out I think it was the M&P 1522. So AR style, but a 22 rifle. And he was kind of like, and I had him in the truck while I was sighting my rifle, so he didn't have to go to the big rifle range. And then we went up to the pistol range, and he still, even with hearing protection, was like, Dad, this is loud. Like, I don't like this. Like, there's stuff exploding all over the place. And he's 10, and I'm like, man, I've kind of spoiled him with being able to go out to, we'll just go up the mountain and you can shoot little targets at whatever. And we're the only ones in that spot. And he doesn't have to deal with all this noise going around him. And also they shoot suppressed, so everyone else at the range is not suppressed and they get to shoot suppressed. So they don't always have to wear hearing protection. So it's definitely something that you want to make sure that you make a good experience for whether it's your spouse or your kids. Because they may not want to come back. Again, you simply pinch a finger. Even loading magazines. Like, if you notice that it's tough, don't be like, hey, man up and don't be a pansy. Just like help them load the magazine. Show them how it's done. Show them how to make sure the magazine's seated properly. If they can't charge the charging handle, help them with that. There's so many things that, again, the ego might come into play. Don't let the ego come into play, or you will lose your kids or your spouse or your girlfriend or whoever to
I
that.
think we see that even on social media. And one of the things that I always laugh about is the clip magazine conversation, especially when it's a new shooter and they're asking a question. Yeah, we all know what they're talking about. Answer the question and don't make them feel less than, or, how we've all been there where we had to learn. So, I mean, I see that and people are like, oh, how can you dare call it that? It's not a clip, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what part of that is going to want to make that person become part of the shooting community?
Exactly.
They're going to be like, nope, all those stereotypes I had of that group, they're exactly right. And it's just little things that I'm like, back to the whole, eating out experience. Little things that if you can make people feel good about it, there's a much better chance they'll say, hey, can we go to the range again?
Yep. Exactly. And the other thing too, especially if you've got kids or someone new to shooting, I don't recommend that you go and think you're going to get, it's like with hunting. I say the same thing to people that ask me about taking their kids hunting. I'm like, don't expect to go kill the biggest whatever you're after if you're bringing your kids. Like, set the bar low, let them focus on their experience with hunting, bring them good snacks, make sure they're warm, they're dry, and they have plenty of water and whatever else they want. Like, your backpack is going to be a lot heavier because you're carrying all their goodies to keep them going with you. Same thing with shooting, make sure maybe that's the one day a week you get to go to the range, or an hour a month maybe that you get to go to the range. If you want to get your kids or spouse or someone new involved in that, understand that you may have to sacrifice that personal hour, because they're going to want, and they're going to eventually want to go back with you. And then they'll get to the point where they can do the stuff themselves right beside you on the shooting line or wherever it is that you go shooting. But you do have to go in with kind of that lower bar of, I'm not going to get the me time per se, but I am introducing someone else into this, and it's going to be fun.
And it's something, if you do it the right way, that, we see granddads in their, they're in their 70s and 80s out shooting with their great grandchild or great grandchild. And I'm like, what's more special than that when you can finally bring it all together and bring it full circle? But you have to do it the right way from the beginning, exactly what you just said.
Yep,
and
exactly.
From our side, there's nothing better than getting pictures from, a customer that I just had an email from a guy last week. He's 79 years old and just getting into competition shooting.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I'm like, how awesome is that? I'm like, that's my goal to, be starting new things when I'm 79, 80 years old. And he just ordered a new pistol and he's like, I need all the help I can get.
Exactly. And again, it's, a 22 is a great, it's a step up from, a BB essentially. Obviously it's lethal, but there's not hardly any kick to it, especially if you add a suppressor or you have any kind of weight on the rifle. You're able to go hit at distance, especially with the rifles that you guys make. You can stretch it out a little bit further than just the 50 yards or 100 yards and still be able to hit targets. And then on top of all that, you can, find some fun little, you don't have to buy that AR 500 steel to be able to shoot. Right. You can find cheaper targets that you can have fun with, and
you can buy those little swinging targets.
Yeah.
That are relatively inexpensive, but instant reaction for the kids or whoever, and they can still be challenging. So there's so many options there, and you don't break you can buy cheap ammo.
Yeah.
That's one question we get a lot of times. They'll say, do I have to buy the expensive match ammo to shoot in your gun? I'm like, no, you can shoot just about any 22 LR ammo, because we realize part of the fun of shooting 22 is making it inexpensive. And there's guys, especially out in Utah where you're at, the long range guys, that's huge out there, where they'll spend $20 a box. But for a lot of people, that completely takes away the fun of shooting 22.
Yep.
So like, we want it to function and cycle with the stuff you can run to, your local store and buy, and not have to order it in, not have to break the bank and go that route.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, and they do say, obviously 22 is a dirty caliber, especially if you're buying the cheaper stuff. So make sure you know how to clean the gun, especially if you've got, go ahead.
One thing I will say, with our DLC coating on the bolt, and then us using all hardened tool steel for the internal parts, is we actually recommend very little lubrication on our firearms, which helps with that problem, because part of what happens is guys start to have problems. They dump oil in it. They have more problems. So they dump more oil, and it just gives it more room for that to attract to. And next thing you know, they have a gummy mess that won't cycle at all.
It's like putting deodorant on when you already stink. Don't do that, guys. Like, that's not how that works.
I may have to use that at some point in the future.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that really is. It's you know, and that's fresh on my mind because I've got a 10-year-old that's starting to wear deodorant. So he's like, why can't I put this on after? I'm like, no, that's not. Like, you may have friends that do that. Don't be the guy that's spraying Axe after gym class in the locker room.
Yeah, let's call that a shower.
That. Like, exactly. Put it on when you're clean. But yeah, that's a great point. So I'd love to dive in a little bit more again about what makes your rifle stand out for people that maybe don't know what DLC coating is, and you know, the hardening of the breech area. Like those things are, again, you might be paying a premium up front compared to getting a 1022 at Walmart, but in the long run, you're actually, wouldn't say saving money. Don't try and fool yourself like that. Like I tell my wife, these are investments, you know, like it's not necessarily that you're saving money, but at the same time, it becomes worth it after you've had to clean the rifle multiple times, or maybe you do run into some jamming issues, or, you know, eventually you do have to change out the barrel or the action or something like that on the cheaper one. This is going to last you a lot longer. Like you said, 109,000 plus rounds on one of them. So let's go into that a little bit more. What's the DLC coating?
DLC is a diamond-like carbon coating. And basically it is just when you look at it, it almost looks like there's lubrication on it. It's a very slick finish, very corrosion resistant. And I mean, I don't want to overplay it, but it's probably one of the biggest things that we've added to both our we only put it on, so it's not on our Magnum rifles like the HMR or the 22 mag, because we use tungsten bolts there. But on all of our 22 long rifle products, it's one of the features, because you can run it dry. You don't end up with that residue buildup. And the nice thing is, when it is time to clean it, I mean, it just wipes off. Mm-hmm. So we've done suppressor events where guys have put 2,500 rounds through one of our pistols during the day, suppressed. We haven't cleaned it, oiled it, anything by the end of the day.
And just to mention there, so when he's talking about suppressed, if you are getting into that, which I highly recommend, and 22 suppressors, you know, I run the Mask from Dead Air. They just came out with another collaboration with Ruger, the RXD 22. And those are both fantastic cans. They're also on the cheaper end, or more economical end. I don't want to say cheap because they're not cheap, but more economical and more achievable to get started. And if you run subsonic 22 ammo through them, they really are the only gun that I've found that are like movie quiet, where the bolt is actually louder than the gun going off. But anyway, the reason he's bringing up suppressed is because it does push back a lot of that carbon back down, like back towards the barrel, rather than out the front, which creates a dirtier bolt or action.
100%. And, you know, almost to the point that when people talk about shooting rimfire suppressed, it comes with a negative connotation because it's so hard to get to cycle properly for the reason you just mentioned.
Yep.
And, you know, and that's where, you know, we almost take that as a challenge when somebody says, well, you can't get it to run. And that's where we're able to apply, you know, 30, 40 years of experience to try different things. And, you know, there's always new code. And the other thing that we're also very careful of is we won't use a certain material just because it's the popular material. Mm-hmm. You know, for example, like on the 1022 for a long time, a titanium magazine release was extremely popular. And guys are like, why don't you offer one? I'm like, it serves no additional benefit other than being more expensive. Mm-hmm. You know, and so we are very, you know, I don't want it to seem like we try to make our stuff cost as much as possible. We want it to be there's got to be a purpose behind it.
Yeah, if you're making someone, or I wouldn't say making someone, but if you're offering a product that's going to cost more, you want it to be for a reason other than looking good, right?
Yes.
Obviously, people want things to look good, but yeah, in this case, like, what does that? It's not like you're beating on that titanium mag release, or there's not really a purpose behind that particular item.
And there's even little things that we do along that same line is like all of our aluminum products, for the most part, when it matters, they are like our aluminum receivers that we use for the 1022. They're all type 3 hard anodized. A lot of companies will go with a type 2 anodizing because it offers more color options. But in our mind, that comes at a sacrifice as far as longevity, durability. So we stick with the type 3 black hard anodizing. So there's a lot of little things that we try to do. And we have to, because our warranty is very liberal.
Yeah.
Basically we guarantee them for life. The written warranty says a year, but we've replaced parts on guys' rifles that are 20 years old.
Yep.
And part of doing that is we're very confident in the parts we're putting in there, that if they do fail, if an extractor breaks, whether it's a week old or 30 years old, that's not on the customer, that's on us.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And that's similar. I mean, you brought up Montana Knife Company behind me, which is a company that I support and work with. LEUPOLD's very similar. They have these warranties because they believe in their product. And again, you may be paying a premium for an MKC knife, a Volquartsen Firearms, a LEUPOLD scope or something like that, rather than, again, something you pick up at Walmart. I get that question all the time. Why should I buy an MKC knife when I can go buy this fixed blade, whatever, at Walmart for a third or less of the cost? I'm like, I mean, you can go do that, but come back to me when you're ready, when you've broken that knife, because they're not going to replace it for you like MKC will. So it's just one of those things that I think is awesome about you guys as well. Again, you're like, the written warranties here, but we're going above and beyond, as long as it's not obviously, been abused to where they're beating it against a brick wall or something like that.
Yeah. And we've seen that. And even then we try to work with, the biggest thing I always tell people is, I think it's my 30th year that I've been here, is tell me the truth or what happened. Mm-hmm. And we will bend over backwards to help you. If you make up a story of what allegedly happened and try to pin it on us, mm-hmm. A lot of times we see right through that. Yep. And I'm like, I'm less likely to want to help than the guy that, if a guy calls up and says, I've screwed up. Mm-hmm. I went to install this and I read the instructions wrong and I completely messed up this part. I'll be like, I'll send you a new one. He's like, well, it's my fault. I'm like, I get that.
But you learned.
But you learned and you were open, honest. And I know the guys at MKC are very similar to that.
Yep.
Which is
exactly.
Which is cool to see, because like we discussed earlier or before we went on air, I met those guys right as they were launching that company, and to see how they've done it from the ground up and at the rate they have is pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. And it's funny you say that, because it's similar in the bow shop when I go up there and help them out every once in a while. When people come in, they're like, man, I don't know what happened. It's very obviously a dry fire. It's like, look, dude, if you come in and you're like, hey, I was excited, whatever, I forgot to load an arrow. Cool. And I've seen them take care of, I'm not going to speak for them, but I've seen them take care of the customers, brand new limbs, brand new cams. And technically they're supposed to pay for the install. And they're just like, it's all right. Like, first time, we got you, kind of deal.
Yeah.
And most people, most good reputable companies are that way. And yes. I love hearing that you guys are similar in that way. Again, it is one of those things that can be, people can get, I guess, sticker shocked if they look at it. But at the same time, they're not what they're seeing in the price. They're not hearing as what we're talking about right now, of everything that comes with that, to make sure they have the best of the best of what they're getting. And then on top of that, the people behind the product, I mean, that you can't really put a price on that. If you did, your rifles would probably be 3 times as much as they are.
And the other thing I will say is for guys that are, especially if they don't want to invest in a full firearm, we do a lot of aftermarket parts. Mm. And the one cool thing about that is we have a lot of people who they will go and build that, they'll buy a 1022 or a Mark IV, and then they'll customize it, but they'll do it with their son or their daughter. Mm-hmm. And eventually they can get to almost a fully custom firearm, but they can do it more on their budget of this part here.
Yep.
And
piece at a time.
Yeah. And for some people, if you just want to go out and play, a off the shelf, Mark IV or 1522, whatever it is, with just, maybe a new extractor, a new firing pin is all they need. And we're more than willing to help them with that too, just because we love to see more people involved in the shooting sports. And, we feel once they get hooked, they'll eventually learn that, okay, this is maybe what I need more of.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's awesome. And I would agree, again, with everything that you've said here. It's a quality product with quality people from a quality company that you guys have been in this for decades. I mean, at this point, you mentioned late 80s or late 70s that your dad started. So that's almost 50 years of experience, generational experience. And that's something that can't be said in a lot of places. You guys are obviously doing it right if you're sticking around that long in an industry that is pretty saturated in the firearms industry in general. You guys sticking around for so long and having the great customer base that you have speaks volumes as well. So
thank you.
I do want to kind of wrap this up by talking about something that we've discussed off air, and a lot of people who are in the firearms industry understand what's going on right now with the pushback against the NFA. They're getting rid of the $200 tax stamp, all of those things that have been signed into law, and there's further push to get rid of some other things on that list as well, that have kept people from maybe growing their collections a little bit more, or however you want to say that. But with suppressors more than anything, I think it is something that, and ever since I've had suppressors, it really does change, whether it's a new shooter getting into it or even just going out and putting off multiple rounds, and then of course into the hunting space as well. It really does change the firearms experience. You guys are working on, and you currently have, but are working on kind of that push towards this integrally suppressed firearm. Explain a little bit about what that is. And unfortunately, it's still on this NFA list, which I think is silly because there are no baffles. It's not technically a suppressor. But let's get into what integrally suppressed firearms look like from you guys, and why someone might want that option.
So we teamed up with Angstead Arms. They offer what they call their Vanquish barrel, which is designed for the 1022. And then we built it into our Summit straight pull and our semi-auto. But basically, the integrally suppressed, for those that don't know, is it looks just like a normal barrel. It's not a threaded on external suppressor that you see on a lot of the Instagram photos or videos or movies, whatever. So it looks just like a normal rifle barrel, but like you said, it's ported and comes out subsonic and is very quiet. Mm-hmm. The one downside is when guys had to pay the $200 tax stamp, is they were paying that $200 stamp specifically for that firearm. Where a lot of guys would opt to say, if I'm going to do all that, I'm going to do that for a threaded on suppressor that I can put on this pistol, this rifle, multiple platforms. So by that going away, like you said, I would love to have it come off the NFA. I'm like anybody else, but at least having that $200 expense go away, it makes the integrally suppressed firearm a more realistic option for a lot of guys. And eventually we're going to start incorporating something very similar into our pistols.
Okay. That's awesome.
We've talked to a couple different suppressor companies, and we get asked a lot, so I'll just answer it here, is, are we going to make our own suppressors, as far as and like we talked off air, there's a lot of companies, and they do Dead Air makes a phenomenal we recommend the mask a lot. It works for our 17, 22 mag, 22 long rifle. And there's a lot of, and that's what they do.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's, if one thing I've learned is it's kind of like us with rimfires. It's what we do. It's hard to replicate sometimes some of that experience. You know, it's easy on the premise to say, I'm going to make a suppressor. The technology is not difficult.
Yeah.
Making a good one that cleans easy, doesn't have that first round pop. Now that becomes a whole nother thing. You know, I always equate it to like barrel making. Mm-hmm. You can make a barrel. Making a good barrel is a whole nother can of worms.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you don't, when you want the groups to look cleaner, touching,
yes,
you know, or in the same hole, that's a little different than just any other barrel. And again, you know, it's just like anything else. There's this bell curve of, you know, price versus what you're getting, right? And I feel like you guys, you're obviously on the upper end of the 22 or the rimfire area, but it's not that you're adding these things that don't provide value. Like, it's not just to look pretty, it's not just to be cool for a photo, but after a couple range sessions, it's no longer functional or working for you. So that's awesome. I love the idea of the integrally suppressed barrels. It definitely, it's awesome that you don't have to worry about making sure it's threaded on properly or anything along those lines. And there's a lot of benefits to that option. It's weird to me because I feel like even the ATF, and I won't go too far down this rabbit hole, but they don't even really understand everything, which you can't expect everyone in the organization to understand everything, right? It's just like if you run into a DNR officer, you know. took a little break here for a second, but no, we just talking about, again, the suppressors. There are obviously it's a lot of fun. It's something that for the kids, I highly recommend. For the adults, I highly recommend as well. Even especially on the bigger bore rifles, but honestly, even on 22s, I see a lot of people that go out there and like, oh, it's not that loud, you know, without a suppressor. Like, yeah, but you're still damaging your hearing ever so slightly. It's just like the loud music you listened to in high school or all the concerts you went to, you know, there's slow and steady damage, and you don't want to lose your hearing.
If you call and talk to my dad right now, you would understand that 22s can do hearing damage.
Yeah. Huh? What?
There's a lot of what he's like, I can't hear you. I'm like, I can't talk any louder.
And what's this ringing that's constantly in my ear? Okay. But yeah, no, it's something that I definitely recommend for most people. And it'll change your experience completely, especially with rimfire. It's almost magical how well it works.
And especially when you're training, you know, a new shooter, wearing, especially for a young child, wearing over the ear pro, it's not comfortable for an extended period of time, and they can't hear what you're trying to tell them a lot of times. Where when you're shooting suppress, it's so much easier to have that communication back and forth. And, you know, like you said with your son, it eliminates all those loud noises around it. It allows them to concentrate on their breathing, what they're doing, versus, you know, being startled by a loud noise or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And even though, you know, with hearing protection, you can hear it, like if you shoot steel or anything like that, you can hear it. But for a kid, again, getting that feedback of I hit something is always fun too, you know, and so that's all for all those reasons. The integrally suppressed barrels, or if you go with a mask, which is, you know, what I've got, or the new RXD 22, which is even better at suppressing and doing a lot of that recoil management as well. Those are all really good options, and it makes sense that you guys wouldn't want to dive into that. That's even more of a saturated market. It seems like anyone that has some CAD knowledge and even 3D printing knowledge at this point, and has an FFL or whatever it is required to actually build these things, is making them now. And so it's something that I highly recommend people. And if you've got questions about it, you can drop them down below. If you're watching this on YouTube or hearing this on Instagram, send me a message. We can chat a little bit more about it, but it really does make a big difference for new shooters and old shooters. I mean, suppress should be the new standard. It really should be. It is in Europe, from what I understand. People that go over there and hunt and shoot, I've got
it's encouraged even in
yeah,
countries like the UK where they are very strict with a lot of their gun regulations. The suppressors are encouraged for noise control.
Yep, exactly, and it really and don't be. I guess I don't want to say. I guess don't go into it thinking it's going to sound like James Bond, because it's not.
No.
You still get a little pop. It's like a little firecracker going off, whatever. But it's to the level where it's hearing safe. And again, if you're shooting subsonic ammo, it can get very quiet and even more enjoyable to shoot.
And the other thing too is we've come a long ways in one, obviously the turnaround times on the licensing for suppressors. Yep. But even more than that, the simplicity of, a lot of gun dealers have the kiosk now that you can do it, or they're able to do, from where we were 10 or 15 years ago, that whole process has become infinitely easier. And there's no longer a 10 to 12 month wait. And to your point, which I thought was great too, don't be afraid to ask questions, because not knowing can get you into trouble, whether it's, I always look at like the SBRs with, especially when that pistol brace thing, came around, of how many people unknowingly were breaking federal law. Yep. And not out of like, I'm going to challenge the law, but out of just not knowing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So asking a few questions to whether it's people that are more experienced, to your local gun dealer, whoever it might be, just makes everything much easier and prevents potential issues.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's something that, again, you want to make sure you ask the right questions. You want to make sure, whether you go through a trust, whether you go through, single person, there's so many kind of nuances to it. And I think a lot of people get hung up on that. And then of course the $200 tax stamp on top of purchasing the suppressor, in this case, the integrally suppressed firearm, that, you need to find the right place that you can ask these questions, and don't feel dumb asking them. In my opinion, there's no real dumb questions unless you've been informed multiple times and you should know the answer already. That's when it becomes a dumb question. But if you really don't know, always, I'm not the expert, but I can point you in the right direction of where you can go. And again, I highly recommend, Volquartsen, for if you have it in your budget to be able to get a nicer rifle. This is one of those that you'll buy once, kind of the buy once, cry once scenario.
But I don't think
I don't think you'll just buy once you've got one. So yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on, Scott, before we wrap this up?
I think that covers it. If people do have any questions, we pride ourselves on our customer service of answering questions, because our thing too is, if somebody's going to spend $1,500 on a 22, we want them to get the right one for their needs. It doesn't do us any good to sell a firearm to somebody that, they just tried ordering it online and, shipped to their dealer, but it wasn't exactly what they needed for their right. application. Ask questions. We're always more than open to answering them. And like I said, it benefits us to get you in the right firearm, because I'm still a huge proponent of word of mouth advertising. And the easiest way to do that is to have you happy with your purchase.
Yep, exactly. And I guess a question that I'm thinking of to end this is, what's the most popular rifle and the most popular pistol that's ordered from you guys?
The most popular pistol right now is our 4.5-inch Black Mamba. And that is because the accuracy is still there, even though it's only a 4.5-inch barrel, but yet you can put that suppressor on and it doesn't get overly long. And then on the rifle, our most popular by far is what we call our super light. And that is our carbon fiber barrel. It does have 1/2x28 threads on it, but the accuracy is comparable, just as good as what our heavy barrels are. And that's something we've learned over a lot of time with our lightweight barrels, is it's almost funny to go back and look at our first iteration of those in the late 90s compared to where we've come now. So, we no longer lose accuracy or anything like that to go to the lighter weight barrel.
I see that. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and there's a ton of options, guys. Just looking at the website here, if you go with a 22 LR, you can go everything from a Hogue stock, which is kind of the baseline, and you can get a wood stock with a bunch of fancy cutouts and a cheek weld and a thumb hole. And then there's
right now the chassis are getting real popular,
chassis.
like the gray birch, the oryx, and there's the arcane from Enoch. There's a lot of good chassis out there right now.
I was gonna say, do you guys make your own chassis?
Not right now.
Okay, who do you go with for your chassis?
We use one from gray birch. Okay. We use one from Enoch, and we use one from Oryx, which is MDT.
Yep. So the Oryx we actually just put on our 308, and that is a fantastic option. And I'm seeing that's where you have that here. Yeah.
That's where a lot of guys like the Oryx because it replicates what they're doing with their high power rifles. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, you guys are blessed with a lot of 1,000-yard ranges out in Utah, but a lot of areas of the country don't necessarily have 1,000 yards to shoot. So they'll go out and practice at 200 or 300 yards with a 22 because it's the same mechanics, the same techniques as shooting a 308 at like, let's say 800 yards.
Yeah.
But a little more cost effective and a little easier to find a 200 or 300 yard range than it is 1,000.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I will say, guys, that Oryx chassis, and I was looking at it here, that thing is awesome on the 308, but also a couple things with that is, it's not, or it is adjustable for length of pull, and also the cheek weld is adjustable. So you've got a bunch of options there. Again, if you're shooting it versus your kid, or if you want it set up for both, you can change that on the fly. They're both really, or that's a really good option. So you've got that.
MDT is one of those companies that they're not the cheapest brand out there. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think they make $1,000 bipod.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
plus
they do things plus they do things the right way.
Yes. Yep.
You get what you pay for with them, which is high quality and
good customer service. They're good people too. Yeah, I'm gonna have the person that I work with over at MDT on the podcast as well, because they do a really good job with the products that I've gotten, and the things that I've seen, the people that I've met from the company. Again, they're just very similar in that they don't skimp on quality, but they also aren't overselling something that doesn't make sense. And they have a lot of options. They do have, the more economical options of stocks, and then they have everything up to their 26-ounce Hunter carbon fiber. I think that one's, I don't know, probably $1,600 just for the chassis. So you've got everything in between there. But the Oryx, that's a great one. I could see that being awesome for a 22 or a 17 HMR for sure. But sweet. Yeah. Well, I appreciate your time, Scott. I know obviously
thank you for having me on.
Yeah. And guys, I highly recommend, again, 22s, 17 HMRs, if you want to stretch it out a little bit further, or even go maybe hunting with it more than just squirrels. Those are both really great rimfire options. Again, the suppressed rimfire is probably my favorite option for getting kids into, or anyone new into shooting, and especially rifle, but also the pistols. They're amazing. They're great quality, great people. You guys just met Scott here, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast. And again, thanks, Scott, for your time. And like I always say, guys, well, first, before I say that, go check out Volquartsen Firearms. I'll leave the link down below so you can go check out the Super Light and the Black Mamba. If it's something that you're interested in, definitely go snag one. They're pretty awesome. So with that being said, guys, like I always say, get out, live your life, and love it.